All right. Hello, everyone. We're going to be going live in just a second. We're just waiting for my moderator to join. Jump in and we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. For those who are jumping in while we wait, there he is.
Hi, Charlotte. How you doing?
I'm doing okay, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Now I'm going to ask you the question again because everyone watching should know that we're in Israel. So no one's fully doing okay. So how are you actually holding up?
I think I'm very lucky to a certain extent that I work for Stand With Us and that I have been kept very, very, very busy over the last 72 hours. And so I'm okay. But of course, we all have those times where we need to sit and process everything that's going on. So, it comes in waves. And I think for all of us, it comes in waves. And so, once I can decompress, you start to feel it all. So I'm okay, but I'm just okay, hanging in there. I'm not great. I'm not fantastic. People are dying, and rockets are being launched and your kids are sleeping in a bomb shelter right now. And
They
so
are. They
no,
are. I
none
tell
of
you,
us see anything but okay.
yeah, I mean, I say goodnight to my kids, the youngest of which are in the bomb shelter asleep now. I should say where we are right now, it's quiet. As we speak, we do have rocket fire incoming in different parts of the country. And, hopefully it will stay quiet during this broadcast, but we don't fully know. Say goodnight to my youngest, and she said to me, "Good night, Abba. Good night, Dad. Stay safe." I admit, it broke a little piece of my heart. I got to tell you, it really did. Like, it really
Because
did.
you don't want to live in like, you just don't want your kids to have to say that. You don't want your kids to have to be feeling this. So
Yeah.
that hits, yeah, for sure. And
Anyway, we should say
know,
hello to the Stand With Us community
yeah,
here. Say hi to everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. We decided to go live. And right from the outset, I want to say thank you for all that you're doing. You're sharing our content, not just in the thousands, not just in the tens of thousands, not just in the hundreds of thousands, but really and truly in the millions. And that's super important to us. We're so thrilled to have such an amazing staff who are trying to get the reality of what's going on here in Israel out there. And we couldn't do it without each and every one of you sharing our content and really helping people understand what is happening here. So thank you so much. My name is Michael Dixon. I'm Executive Director of Stand With Us Israel. I'm joined by the fabulous Charlotte Korchak, our senior educator. And what we wanted to do is to break down a bit of what's happening here so people understand why it's happening and understand a bit more about what is happening. So if you're okay, Charlotte, I'd like to just jump straight into it.
let's do it. Been doing it all
So
day.
yeah, so let's talk about why now? Why has this conflict escalated now?
So I actually think what's really important is for people to know that this all didn't start this week. I think the media turned their cameras on Monday when riots broke out on the Temple Mount and Israeli police unfortunately had to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that of course went viral because it was sad. That's that we never want to have to enter a mosque while people are praying, but when there's violent rioters who are using that mosque as a shelter, unfortunately sometimes we're out of options. But it didn't start there. This has been going on. I live in Jerusalem, and the focal point of all of this was my city for not the last week, but for the last month. This started a month ago. The tension began to rise in early April, mid-April, when Ramadan started. And Ramadan is always a tense time, and it's always a time, unfortunately, where we see riots break out between the Arabs and Muslims who are practicing Ramadan and the police. But if you go back, we have a TikTok challenge that came out in the middle of April that was encouraging young Arabs in Jerusalem to beat young Jews in Jerusalem. And we saw these videos come out, and that started the tension. And then we saw, again, just police trying to kind of disperse Ramadan gatherings because of COVID, but also to prevent, any kind of outbreak, which just led to, unfortunately, more escalation. And so it didn't start now. And I really implore everyone watching to look back. Stand With Us is going to be putting out a timeline of kind of everything that happened over the last month. And I think it's really important to let people know that this didn't start this month, this week. It didn't start with Sheikh Jarrah, which I'm sure we'll talk about. It didn't start with this property dispute in this neighborhood in Jerusalem. It started before. The tensions were building well before. And these things were being used as an excuse to increase to escalate the violence to what we've unfortunately seen in this last week. But this was very much planned and to a certain extent manufactured by Fatah, the predominant political party who rules in the West Bank alongside the Israeli military, and Hamas, their rival who sits in the Gaza Strip, who have been inciting this violence for the last few weeks. So it didn't start here, and it wasn't spontaneous. This has been very much kind of manufactured by Palestinian leadership, and we can talk why, but I'll hand it back to you for another question.
Yeah, and so this conflict it's being fueled all the meantime. And you spoke about incitement that's happening on social media, TikTok challenges, beat up a Jew, that kind of thing, and powerful forces behind it, funding it. You know, Iran is one of them, and there are lots of people a part in making this tension continue. So now that this is continuing, let's talk about, I tell you what I'd like to do, Charlotte. I'd like to pose to you the questions that the international media are posing about Israel and see if we can get to some answers and help our viewers get to some answers as well. So the biggest questions you see from journalists is, you know, the Israeli response to Hamas escalation. They would say it's disproportionate. How would you answer that?
What's proportionality? Would it be proportionate if Israel launched 1,500 rockets indiscriminately into the Gaza Strip at innocent people? Is that what they prefer our response to be, as opposed to a calculated response by Israel that is specifically targeting terror structures and terror infrastructure with doing everything in their power to try to minimize civilian casualties? And let's be very clear about this, because it's right there, so obvious and so blatant. It's in your face, right? We saw videos of a 13-story building in Gaza being destroyed by Israel. Now, why? Why would Israel do that? Well, because in that building, Hamas intelligence was being housed alongside residents, alongside citizens of Gaza who have nothing to do with this. But Hamas houses their headquarters, their intelligence headquarters, in this residential building, alongside some media and some other Hamas infrastructure. So Israel targets this building. It's destroyed. It's a 13-story high-rise. And yet there are almost no civilian casualties from that attack. Why? How's that possible? If Israel is just indiscriminately firing into Gaza and wants to kill innocent civilians, how is that possible that then a 13-story building is taken out and there's no casualties? You know why? Because Israel makes sure that they give hours of warning to ensure that that building was entirely empty before it was targeted. Because we are not trying to kill innocent people. We are trying to hit them where it hurts, to hit them where it will then affect us, which is targeting the terrorists, which are Hamas, who are causing this. And let's be very clear. When Hamas fires their rockets into Israel, we don't get warnings other than our own warning systems, the sirens that go off. And thank God we have a government that makes sure that we have bomb shelters and that makes sure that we have a missile defense system that takes out those missiles. So that even though the intent of Hamas firing rockets into city centers, population centers, not military bases.
As we speak, by the way, that's literally happening as we speak.
Literally, it's notification after notification. Exactly. As we speak, firing with the intent to kill innocent people. And let's acknowledge that they've been successful.
Yeah.
Innocent Israelis have now died so far in these bombardments. And one Israeli soldier was killed in these bombardments. So we've had 6 murdered Israelis. Murdered because the intent was to kill. And I'm not in any way trying to minimize the civilian casualties in Gaza. But you can't just look at a situation and judge by numbers. Intent matters. And Israel's intentions are very clear. Our target is terrorist. Stop trying to kill us and we wouldn't have to do anything in Gaza. None of this would be happening. So that's the answer. It's very clear who's targeting what and the intention behind each one. Israel's intention is to harm terrorists. Their intention is to kill innocent people.
And let's break down for people what Hamas really is.
Sure. So Hamas is a terrorist organization that was founded in 1987. They're recognized as a terrorist organization by the United States, by the EU, and many other countries. They have been actively engaged in terrorism since the day that they were founded, killing innocent civilians, which is what designates you a terrorist organization. And 14 years ago, Hamas also won an election. 15 years ago, excuse me, in 2006, Hamas won an election because Hamas is also a political party within the Palestinian society and the Palestinian Authority. And so when their last election happened, and yes, how sad, their last election was 15 years ago.
Yeah, for a 4-year term, the current.
Right, a 4-year term, right. But, you know, it's been
15th year of a 4-year term. Yeah.
Exactly. And they won. They won a majority of that vote. And I'm not going to sit here and say that's because all Palestinians support terrorism. That's not the reason. There were other internal issues. But the point is that they won this election. But they were a terrorist organization, so no one wanted to give them legitimacy. And so they ended up violently taking over the Gaza Strip from their rival Fatah in 2007. And they've been ruling the Gaza Strip for the last 14 years. And I would say misruling. You know, not really ruling it. They've been basically using it as a base for terrorism while the people in Gaza suffer. You have about 85% of their budget going to terrorist activity and 15% actually going to the people to take care of the infrastructure, to build up the economy, to better, you know, the daily lives of their own people. And so there's another piece to this.
Let's take a look at that for a moment, because there was a lot of fuss in the international media recently about Palestinians getting vaccinations. Hamas is putting its money into terror tunnels aimed to kidnap and kill. It's putting its money into terror infrastructure rather than infrastructure. It's putting its money into building bombs that it can then fire towards civilians in Israel rather than vaccinations, education, healthcare. There's a choice they're making. They have millions and millions.
They have it. They have the money. They're living the leaders of Hamas, the ones who are brave enough, the ones who actually want to live in Gaza, they live great lives. They live in beautiful homes. They get paid very nice salaries while people live down the street suffering. And we have to acknowledge something. We have to separate out the Gazans from Hamas. They're not the same. And you should have an immense amount of sympathy for the innocent people living in Gaza who have to live under the terrorist regime that is Hamas, who has done nothing to help them. And so it's so hard as an Israeli because you want to be against Hamas, but at the same time you have this immense sympathy for the people who are living so close to you, but then you feel this helplessness of what more can we do other than sending in the aid that we can, the 30,000 tons of aid that Israel sends in weekly into the Gaza Strip. But the aid goes into the hands of Hamas because we have no internal control. And so it's really, really sad. And Hamas, their interest is very simple. It's in their charter. They want to obliterate Israel and obliterate the Jews. It's stated in black and white. And so,
And we actually have a copy of the Hamas Charter. We have a bunch of resources, materials, things people can share. If you go to standwithus.com/situation room, standwithus.com/situation room, you can read the Hamas Charter. You can share all this stuff with others, tons of facts for you to share, images, etc. There's people from around the world giving love and comments, and we appreciate it so much. And also somebody who unfortunately said during this broadcast they had to run into a bomb shelter, so we feel for you. Let's talk about Gaza. And you know, if we go back in history, there was a time when Gazans and Israelis mixed together, shopped together, frequented each other's homes and communities. And then, of course, things became more tense. And in 2005, Israel withdrew. It took out all of its forces in the disengagement from Gaza. Talk to us a bit about the control of Gaza.
So it's actually really interesting. So Israel takes control over the Gaza Strip in 1967 from the Egyptians, who really were never supposed to be there to begin with. They took control over the area during the Independence War. So Israel takes control in 1967, and they rule the area until 2005. And Yes, what you said is true. Under Israeli control, for a long time, there were no Jews living in the Gaza Strip. In the 1980s, Jews will start to move into the Gaza Strip, and we'll actually see real coexistence. In fact, you hear stories of the Gazans welcoming the Jews in when they started to move there. They were, going to bring in more in a better economy. They were going to start to be more agricultural and start to grow more things and help also provide jobs to the people in Gaza. And so they were to a certain extent welcomed. Then there was real coexistence. Again, settlers in Gaza would go to Gaza City. They'd sit and have coffee with Palestinians. It was really a different world than what we see today. And then Hamas comes to be in 1987, and things start to get worse in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But still, they live their lives. But when the second intifada started in the year 2000, we're going to start to see a deterioration, unfortunately, of those relationships and more targeting of those communities in Gaza, which with all of that prompts Israel in 2005 to fully withdraw from the Gaza Strip. So they pull out all of the settlers. About 8,000 people are removed from their homes.
Bold move. It's a bid for peace. It's a bold move. And, they could have, at that stage, there was a big choice to be made, right? Things could have gone a completely different way for Gaza.
This is the saddest part, right? Because what's remarkable to me is how much people kind of demonize Israel, right? And say like how Israel control is so bad. But under Israeli control, and I'm not advocating for us to return to Israeli control, but under Israeli control, you had Israel taking care of the infrastructure, taking care and making sure that, people were getting good healthcare and good education and doing what they were supposed to be doing as the leading power in the area. And then comes Hamas and they run the area into the ground. And yet somehow Israel is blamed for the current conditions in Gaza. And they say, see, you just hate the Palestinians and you want to oppress them, and that's why you're doing this to them. Meanwhile, that doesn't make sense, because for the 40 years that it was under our control, we took care of the area. And let's note that for at least 15 of those years, there were no Jews living there. So we improved the conditions of Gaza for the Palestinians. And I'm not advocating that means that should have been the permanent reality, but to then come and blame us for the deterioration of the region, of the territory over the last 14 years, makes no sense. We're not present in Gaza. Now, granted, I can't neglect to mention that after Israel withdrew and Hamas took over, Israel implemented a blockade around Gaza, basically trying to stop all weapons from being able to get into Gaza, into the hands of Hamas, which legally speaking is totally legitimate to implement a blockade because you're in armed conflict. And again, obviously, it's very clear why we don't want Hamas to get weapon caches from places like Iran, because as we speak, they're being used against us. So we implemented a blockade, but let's be very clear. Today, that blockade ensures that anything that people want to go into Gaza can go into Gaza as long as it's checked by Israel. There's a list of things that can't go into Gaza. Those are things that are used for terrorist activity. And things that can be used as what they call dual use. So, for example, metal pipes. The sewage system in Gaza has been completely dug up by Hamas, which, by the way, was laid by Israel. And they've dug up those metal pipes to then use them to make rockets. So Israel won't send in metal pipes, but they will send in hard plastic pipes. Hamas doesn't want those. Shocking. And so there is a list of things that can't go in, but everything else, humanitarian aid, food, water, medical supplies, it can all go in. It just has to go.
Also abused is worth saying. I mean, we've seen potassium nitrate smuggled into sugar sacks in order to make explosives. Hamas, unfortunately, will take things that are given for the good of the people of Gaza and abuse them.
Toys. Imagine you want to send in, you have sons, right? We've all had those little motorized cars, right? Where you have a car and you have a remote and you're driving it around. And why would that not go into Gaza? Well, because they're going to take the motor out of it and they're going to use it for a rocket. I mean, it sounds crazy, but things that in our day-to-day you would never think would be used for terrorist activity, they've figured out a way. But again, humanitarian aid, medical supplies, food, water, Israel sends into Gaza. And in fact, I would say we are the largest supplier of aid to Gaza every single day. And so it's so sad the way that it's perceived. And I do want to stress something. The fact that nobody talks about Hamas control over Gaza Nobody talks about how Hamas uses the Palestinians as human shields during these conflicts. Nobody talks about this abuse. All you're doing is allowing Hamas to continue to do what they're doing. In fact, even more so, if the media is not reporting on human shields, Hamas is incentivized to use more human shields. Because if the media is only reporting the casualties, but not blaming Hamas for the use of human shields, well, then it's working from a propaganda perspective, right? Then they're going to get that sympathy. And again, the innocent people absolutely deserve the sympathy, but Hamas doesn't. Hamas isn't free of all blame. And so I want to make this very clear to anybody listening. If you talk about Hamas and if you talk about Gaza and you do not talk about Hamas and the way in which they have controlled that area and what they've done to their citizens, you're part of the problem.
Yeah,
you're it, you're allowing it to continue.
Yeah.
Hamas has no reason to change the conditions in Gaza as long as the conditions in Gaza are being blamed on Israel. So those people are living a life where they have 75% unemployment and they have no clean water source other than what Israel sends in because Hamas destroyed the aquifer. They have barely electricity because Hamas destroyed the power plant. And so Israel's providing them with electricity. And again, if you continue to blame all this on Israel, you are contributing to the suffering of the people in Gaza. It's as simple as that.
Charlotte, lots of people telling us we need to save this live and post it so they can revisit it and learn and help other people learn as well. We'll do that. Please join us on standwithus.com/situation room. Let's go back to the whole idea of incitement, because there's been a ton of incitement online in Arabic social media. You mentioned TikTok. We saw a Hamas leader incite to murder in the most horrific way on a video, telling people to go out and buy 5-shekel knives and cut Jews' heads off. So I want to talk about Jerusalem, because a lot of the incitement has centered around Jerusalem. They are trying to make the case that Jerusalem, and particularly Al-Quds, which sits on top of the Temple Mount, is somehow under threat.
No, Al-Aqsa.
Sorry, Al-Aqsa.
Al-Quds is Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's 11:30 at night in Israel, guys. We are tired.
So let's talk about that. The idea that they're saying that Jerusalem is somehow threatened.
I don't understand this claim. The argument of, sorry, it sounds like a riot is breaking out outside of my house, which has happened already once. You can't hear it, right?
I can hear something. If you wanted to go and check that everything's okay, you can.
No. Sounds like singing right now, so hopefully it's not what I think.
Just singing.
I hope it's just that. But it's been hot where I'm living right now. So it's this idea of Al-Aqsa being threatened doesn't make any sense. And it is used as a tool, and has actually been used as a tool historically to cause violence, to encourage violence against Israel and historically against Jews. So let's go back and then I'll explain current. Back in 1929, before the state of Israel was even established, when it was still the British Mandate of Palestine, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, who was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, so the leader of the Muslim community in this area, he said, again, the Jews are going after Al-Aqsa, they're trying to take Al-Aqsa, and it caused a massacre of Jews against Jews in Hebron that took the lives of 69 Jews. We're talking about women, children, horrific things. I'm not going to go into it. Then jump ahead to the year 2000, where you have Yasser Arafat spreading incitement about Al-Aqsa, they're taking Al-Aqsa, and then the second intifada started as a result. Then you've got 2014 and 15, when you have the stabbing, knife, and car ramming intifada in Jerusalem. And also, you can go back, this isn't that long ago, 2014, 2015, you can check out the Fatah incitement about Al-Aqsa. We even had terrorists who were arrested at the time after trying to stab people or car rammed, who said, I did this to protect Al-Aqsa. So clearly the rhetoric is working. Sorry, is this distracting? Should I close the door?
I mean, we can hear it a bit, but we can hear you perfectly. So
okay. All right, because I'm getting a nice breeze. So let's jump to today. here we have a situation where Muslims pray on the Temple Mount every single day. And where is there a threat? And then
Including
some,
today, by the way, which is Eid al-Fitr. We should say Eid Mubarak to our Muslim
yes, to
viewers.
Muslims and Eid Mubarak. I know it's been a hard Ramadan for all of us, but Eid Mubarak, their holiday is ending as we speak. Um,
And Al-Aqsa was full today, full of Muslim worshippers.
with no incidences.
Right.
And so again, we look back and you got to ask yourself, if Israel was constantly infringing on the freedom of worship for the Muslims on Al-Aqsa, then why are we only hearing about it now? And again, we weren't infringing, right? They were up on the mount on Monday praying. It was just that a riot broke out and Israel had to stop the riot because it was threatening. And so it's not that Israel is consistently threatening Al-Aqsa. Yes, we should note that there are some Jews in Israel who would absolutely like to see Israel take back control of the Temple Mount and, you know, do other things there, but they're a minority. The government and the way in which we conduct ourselves is allowing the freedom of worship. And I got to stress something. If anyone is being discriminated against on the Temple Mount, it's not Muslims. Muslims can pray there all day long. They can go up there all day long. The people who are really discriminated against are the Jews and the Christians, who only are allowed a small window of time where they're allowed to go up onto the mount during the day, and they're not allowed to pray. If you go up there and the Islamic Trust, the Waqf, who controls the mount itself, sees you even mouthing words, they will stop you and they will kick you off the mount. And so the idea that somehow it's being threatened against Muslims by Israel makes no sense. And that's why it was so upsetting to see the reaction from the world of just this jerk reaction to believe that Israel was doing this unprovoked, that there was just, you know, we woke up one day and we decided that we were going to attack, you know, people who were peacefully praying in the Al-Aqsa Mosque and on the Temple Mount. It's irrational to think that way. And I hope that the rational, logical thinking person after seeing it would say, wait a second, why did Israel do that? What prompted that? And be able to then look back and understand that this wasn't an unprovoked, you know, attack, that this was very much a response. It wasn't an attack at all. It was a response and an attempt to stop violent rioters from rioting on the Temple Mount and even throwing stones and other things down on Jewish worshipers who were down at the Western Wall Plaza praying at the holiest, well, the site that is the closest to the holiest site for Jews.
We should talk about that. So the Western Wall sits below. There were people hurling boulders over. We saw photos of people, stockpiles of kind of boulders to throw. I mean, that's, by the way, desecrating a holy place, let's be honest. And
yeah.
You know, I love that Hamas says Jerusalem is so important to them that they fire missiles at it. But let's talk about the place of Jerusalem in Judaism. People should understand that.
So first of all, I just want to say there are comments coming up, and we at Stand With Us do not endorse any kind of comments that talk about that all Arabs need to die or anything like that. That is unacceptable rhetoric, and we don't want to be seeing any of that in our comments. That is unacceptable. There's no all Muslims or all Arabs are responsible for any of this, and that rhetoric needs to stop. So I just want to say that's nothing that Stand With Us is. It's very unacceptable, and it's very upsetting to see those comments coming through. Jerusalem has been a holy site for Jews for nearly 3,000 years. It was the site where it became the capital of the Jewish kingdom under King David, and then his son King Solomon, who will build the first temple on the Temple Mount, which is why we call it the Temple Mount. Actually, for the Muslims, they wouldn't be referring it to it that way. They would call it Haram al-Sharif, which is the noble sanctuary. For Jews, it is the #1 holiest site in Judaism. It's where our first temple stood, which was destroyed, and then our second temple, which was rebuilt on that same site, and then was, of course, then destroyed again in 70 of the Common Era. But Jerusalem remains, I refer to it very oftentimes as the heart and soul of the Jewish people. You know, when we pray every day, we pray in the direction of Jerusalem. And in our prayers, we talk about returning to Jerusalem and rebuilding our temple. And so Jerusalem has remained a core feature for the Jewish people. You know, I heard recently in some of the rhetoric that's been going around that, you know, well, the Jews, you know, their time in controlling Jerusalem was minor, you know, was such a blip in history compared to everyone else. And it's like, okay, so the people who actually named it their capital, who actually made it the city that it is, it was taken from them and it was colonized, right? We suffered colonization and expulsion. And you're going to then use that against us, that then we didn't have control over our holy city for 1800 years. Like, you're going to use that against me? It doesn't make it any less significant or holy. And again, it's important to also point out that throughout all of that history, there was almost never a time where Jerusalem became somebody else's capital. It was always part of a larger empire that had a capital somewhere else. Whether it was Damascus or Baghdad, or whether it was, the Roman Empire or the Byzantines, where it was in, Constantinople or in Rome. And so it's important to note that the Jews were the only ones who ever made it officially a capital of any kind, which again shows how significant and how for us it's number one. And so it's been heart and soul. And that's why in 1967, when Israel took control of the eastern part of Jerusalem, this is why we were celebrating on Monday. We were celebrating the fact that now, for the first time in 2,000 years, Jerusalem is in Jewish hands, which means that Jews can now pray and without fear, and have this freedom to be able to worship in their holiest site. Let's understand that between 1949 and 1967, when it was under Jordanian control, they prohibited Jews from even entering the old city, let alone being able to go down to the Western Wall and pray. And so we were celebrating the fact that this city was now going to be free, not just for the Jews, but for everybody. And in the last 54 years that this city has been under Israeli control, it has been the freest city than it ever has been in history, where all religions, all peoples can come and worship freely. You're not allowed to freely start a riot in your holy site and not expect a response, but you can freely worship. And we saw it happen today, and we've seen it happen most days. But everyone wakes up on the one day where there's a violent riot, and we have to stop it.
Let's go from the holy to the unholy. Trevor Noah. The reason I want to mention him, I don't know if you saw it, Charlotte. He did a monologue on The Daily Show about how in this fight between Israel and Hamas, well, Israel is more powerful, therefore Israel is more to blame. What do we think about that equation? And I would throw in there as well, I've heard from some people, well, people in Gaza don't have an iron dome. Let's talk about that.
The people in Gaza do have an iron dome. It's Hamas not firing rockets at Israel. Hamas doesn't fire missiles at Israel. Israel doesn't bomb Gaza, doesn't bomb Hamas. And I implore anyone who's listening to go back and look at the trail of events that has led up to Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. Other than targeted assassinations of Hamas leaders, every time Israel will strike a target in Gaza, it is in direct reaction to Hamas rocket fire. Now, let's be very clear. What does that mean that Israel's more powerful? That means we have more military might? Yeah, but we don't want to use our military might. We're not in any business of wanting to, go and carpet bomb Gaza. And so the idea that we're more powerful and therefore we have more control, actually just the opposite. We actually have less power if you think about it psychologically, because they're targeting our innocent civilians, right? So we're powerless because we want to respond and stop the rocket fire. But when we do, we're then accused of using excessive force. And so actually Hamas has a lot more power in this, because even though they're just firing missiles, they get a free pass as they're targeting innocent civilians every single day. Trevor Noah giving them a pass. Right? They're targeting innocent civilians. But Israel has an airstrike against a Hamas target, and we are vilified across the world. So from this, power is not just how much strength you have militarily or otherwise. It's also the psychological battle and the media battle. And the fact is that we don't have more power in that battle, because look at Trevor Noah himself is proving that. Because here he is, he's giving Hamas a pass, and Israel has airstrikes with minimal casualties. Most of the casualties being terrorists. And we are being attacked worldwide. Jews are being attacked in the streets of New York, of other cities in the world. I have Jews messaging me, telling me that they're scared to leave their homes. I heard a Jew in Santa Monica today was attacked because he was wearing a kippah, and somebody at work saw, and he was verbally abused as a result. So really, Trevor Noah, how much power do we really have? And I understand that he has experiences growing up of a very oppressive regime. And the images probably remind him of that. But the situation is not the same in any way, shape, or form. This is not a situation where there is one side that is good and the other side is bad. This is a situation where you have good people on both sides. You have innocent people on both sides. And you have extremists, you have terrorist organizations on one side that are literally victimizing both of those groups. This is more complicated. This isn't zero sum. This isn't I have to be pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel. No, you can be pro-Israel and support the Israelis who are right now in bomb shelters like your children and the men who have been running into bomb shelters for the last 35 minutes that we've been doing this as rockets have been launched into Israel. And in the exact same breath, you can have sympathy for the innocent people in Gaza who are suffering under Hamas. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. And so you don't need to be anti-Israel to be pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel and be anti-Palestinian. No, I'm pro-Israel and I'm pro-Palestinian. I'm anti-terrorism. I'm anti-Hamas. And that's the point. It's more complicated than this black and white situation that many people like to paint it to be. The Israelis are the oppressors, the Palestinians are the oppressed. The Israelis have more power. Let's also understand something. Jews were helpless. 1800 years. We sat without any power to defend ourselves. We were the victims of pogroms, of massacres. Hell, we were the victims of a genocide because we didn't have the ability to protect ourselves. And so now all of a sudden the Jews have 70 years of being able to actually form an army and protect ourselves. And of course, no, you're not supposed to be protecting yourself. No, you have more power now. So you need to sit back and you just need to let these people kill your citizens because you have more power. It doesn't make sense. Trevor Noah, stop, pull back. There are innocent Israelis who have been killed. Did he also mention the fact that 2 children in Israel were murdered by Hamas? Is that in his little diatribe?
Currently a black Israeli who's kidnapped within Gaza, who's being held by Hamas right now.
Yeah. Did he mention that? But again, did he mention the 6 innocent Israelis who were murdered indiscriminately by Hamas?
Including
No, but I'm sure he mentioned the casualties in Gaza. And I'm sure he mentioned them as one big number without noting the fact that at least half of those people have been terrorists. And we don't know how the others have been killed. Because we also know that of the rockets, I think I mentioned this already in this call, but it's hard to keep track, that of the rockets being launched into Israel, a third of them have landed in Gaza. Mm-hmm. And so, no, there was actually, anyone who's watching can look up this Twitter account at DCI Palestine. It's called the Defender of Children. And they are an organization that is Palestinian that reported that 8 Palestinians were killed in Gaza from Hamas rocket fire. And so what we also have to understand, and what's so frustrating, is the numbers come out and the automatic assumption is that all of these people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. Let's understand that at least 500 missiles now have landed in the Gaza Strip that could have also killed innocent Palestinians in Gaza. So we don't know those numbers, but you're going to report them. Trevor Noah and CNN and others are going to report it and just say 50 people. But when they report about Israel, they make very sure that you know that at least one of our casualties was a soldier. They make sure to separate that out for you. Why? Why the imbalance? Why is it that for some reason Israelis are allowed to be murdered with impunity and nobody comments? There's no sympathy. And so now, really, everyone who's listening who maybe is not a Zionist, maybe is not Israeli, maybe not Jewish, maybe now you understand why us Jews feel that we have to have, that there is no option other than having a country of our own and an army. Because here we are being attacked, and as far as the world is concerned, we shouldn't be defending ourselves. Because you know what? That's how Jews always were. You just took it. Because you didn't have the ability to defend yourself. And guess what? Now we do, but we're doing it in the most moral way possible. And that's the most, I'm proud to say that. And again, there's innocent loss of life, no matter how it happens, is tragic. But intention matters.
So important. Intention matters, certainly does. Senior educator Charlotte Korchak for staying with us. We're going to wrap up soon, but I want to just finish with this, because we've had rocket fire during the course of this conversation. There were rockets a little earlier this evening coming in from Lebanon. We've had some horrific attacks going on. What is the message we want to give to the international community? Because, you know, one of our dear colleagues, Noah, I saw wrote that it's, you know, it's that time of year when every celebrity is a Middle East expert, so everyone's got to chime in. They've all got their thing to say, and all these political leaders and politicians. You know, what should be the response from people of goodwill to what is happening right now in this region?
First of all, there needs to be one very clear message. Hamas, stop attacking innocent Israelis. I don't understand. Why is it hard to condemn this? Why is it hard to condemn rockets falling on Jerusalem and Tel Aviv? And God, we always talk about Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, but we have a colleague who lives very close to the Gaza Strip. We're talking less than 1,000 meters from the Gaza Strip. And they've been bombarded for days. Why? Why is it okay that Israelis are sitting in bomb shelters? And why is it hard to condemn it? So number one, I want to hear condemnation across the board of Hamas missiles targeting innocent civilians. That's number one. The second is that there also needs to be, again, a balance in this is not zero sum. This isn't one side is good and the other side is bad. We're pro-Israel and we're pro-Palestinian. We're anti-terrorism. And that needs to be the message. Because if we were to get rid of the terrorists, this would all be over. I mean,
well,
let's be
Abraham Accords. Look at the peace that's been made between Israel in recent months, and it's a really warm peace. I've never would have imagined that I would have so many friends in the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Morocco from here in Israel. So, you know, peace is possible, but it takes the willingness to do it, and it takes education as well, and it takes pushing the extremists out of the equation.
And the last thing I want to say is exactly what you just said. I mean, our colleague Noah really hit it on the head, right? Can people just stop chiming in on a conflict that you don't understand? I'm sorry, but I have studied this conflict for 15 years and I still feel like there's so much more for me to learn. And I hear from people who don't understand any of it, who break it down to the most basic, just ridiculousness. And it's so upsetting. Why? There are conflicts going on all over the world and nobody chimes in. Nobody says anything because they'll say, well, I don't understand it. Let me tell you something very clear. The vast majority of people out there do not understand this conflict. And until you do, you shouldn't be commenting on it. And if you want to understand it, we're right here. Stand With Us is right here. I'm right here. We are ready and willing to teach you about it, to go into depth, to help you understand it. So the next time this happens, you can chime in, but you'll chime in the right way. And you'll condemn Hamas. And you'll acknowledge that innocent people are dying on both sides and it's not okay. And understand the full reason as to why that's happening. So we're here for you. And so don't, if you want to chime in, then educate yourself. And don't try to say that you don't have the ability to do so, because we're right here. And there's many other people out there. And there are many people watching this live right now who are Israeli, who are Jewish, who are Zionist, who if you ask them, they would be happy to tell you our story and to help you better understand what's actually going on here. So just stop. All you are doing when you chime in, and you chime in the wrong way, you're actually contributing to terrorists. And I want you to understand that. And so just stop and learn. That's what you can do right now, if anything else. And so we're here for you. Stand With Us is here for you. Our education is out there. And if you want to come to me, you want to get a crash course on Israeli and on the history of the conflict and on Jewish history, I do crash courses all the time. Send me a DM. I'll send you a link. You can sign up for a crash course. Let's do it. It takes some time. It takes some effort, but it's worth it if you want to have an opinion and if you want to truly understand and be on the right side of history.
Charlotte, I can't thank you enough. I'm so sorry to have to break this while we're on this call, but an 87-year-old woman has just died as in the middle of a rocket. attack. She fell on the way to running to a shelter. So our thoughts are with everybody who is suffering in this horrific time, everybody innocent who's caught in the crossfire. I hope everybody stands up and makes their voice heard and speaks loud and proud. Israel is not going anywhere. Tiny little Israel, powerful as it is and strong as it is and historic as it is, you know, the
as resilient, right,
and as
Michael?
resilient, I wrote a book about it, as resilient as it is, and it will continue to be resilient. So Am Yisrael Chai, our thoughts and prayers with everybody. Stay strong. Thank you so much to all our supporters all around the world for what you're doing night and day to share the reality that's happening here. Go to standwithus.com/situation room. Get knowledgeable, get educated. Thanks for being part of our movement, everybody. God bless.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.